Well, good morning, everybody. And again, welcome to St. Paul United Methodist Church. My name is Bobby Van Dyne, and I have the awesome privilege of being able to serve on staff here as the Senior Director of Ministry. And today I have the great honor of trying to pinch hit for Pastor Bob, who is away with his wife, Patty. They were actually celebrating their 29th wedding anniversary today. So we certainly want to celebrate that incredible milestone with them today. And I just have to say that I think it's awesome. I think it's awesome that while we are in the midst of a sermon series on love and marriage, that our senior pastor and his wife would be modeling for us the importance of carving out time to get away and care for and cultivate and celebrate this important day in their relationship. And so I would ask that you would keep Pastor Bob and Patty in your prayers as they travel back and as they come back and continue to lead St. Paul as we strive to reach this community for Christ. Today, like I said, we are in a sermon series called Love and Marriage. And if you haven't been here, or maybe you have, and let me just kind of recap kind of where we've been. So far, Pastor Bob, he taught in week 1 about some habits of a highly defective marriage. You know, some of the things that we sometimes do that cause division in our relationships, that cause division in our marriages as opposed to bringing them more closely knit together. And then in week 2, he talked about what the Bible actually has to say about divorce. Last week, he talked about what women wish men knew about women. And if I'm being real honest, and I am, I'm real glad that their anniversary wasn't last week and that I would be asked to preach on that topic. But I have to say, I thought he did an incredible job, not only unpacking last week's topic, but all the topics in this sermon series. And that's evidenced by the responses that we continue to get from our congregation. We're getting lots of letters and phone calls saying that this sermon series has had a wonderful impact, a positive impact on your marriages and on your relationships. And so today, this week, I'm going to be looking at the flip side of last week, and that is the topic of what men wish women knew about men. And when I was asked to preach on this topic, I immediately kind of thought two things. The first thing I thought was, man, that's going to be a pretty brief sermon. Because in my estimation, in my thoughts, us guys, we tend to be pretty simple creatures, right? We're not real complicated. And most of us in this room might think, you know, I know exactly what guys want. I know exactly what guys desire. And that may well be true, but I hope that I have maybe some new revelations for you, maybe some new insights for you this morning. And then the second thing I thought was, man, that's a lot of weight and responsibility to carry, to stand before a congregation, to stand before a live stream and say, ladies, I'm going to represent all men today, right? And I'm going to let you know what we need from you, what we want from you. And so I just want you to know that I have consulted and I'm leaning heavily on people who are much, much smarter and wiser than I am when it comes to this topic. I've talked to Pastor Bob at length about this sermon. I'm leaning heavily on the teachings from Adam Hamilton and Joby Martin and an author by the name of Gary Chapman. And so that being said, I have a couple ground rules maybe for us today. I'm going to be saying some things that might be specifically addressed to the men or to the husbands in the room, and then I'm going to be saying some things that are specifically addressed to the ladies and the wives in the room. And so I just want to encourage you. Maybe you're sitting next to your spouse and you're like, man, my spouse really needed to hear that. I would encourage you, though, to not elbow them in the side. I would encourage you not to give the sarcastic call for amen, brother. You know, won't go well for you. I promise you that much. I don't know much, but I do know that. And what I'd like to do is start with some survey results from a huge study that Pastor Adam Hamilton did. And this is what Pastor Bob led us into last week. He did a huge survey on marriage and relationships, and he had some results from his survey. Last week, Pastor Bob, he revealed the women's results, and today I'd like to put those up as well as kind of compare and contrast the guys' results. And so the first question that Adam Hamilton asked was posed to singles, and the question was, what are you looking for in a potential mate? What are you looking for in a potential mate? And the responses here, I think, are not only important to folks who are single, but also to folks who are married, because just because we get married, we can't just put it on cruise control, right, and to stop trying to be about these things that are so important for us. And so last week, if you remember, the top 5 for women, number 5 was a good communicator. Number 4, they were looking for a man who was intelligent and stable. Number 3 was a man who had a strong faith. Number 2 was a man who was fun or humorous. And number 1 was a man who is honest and trustworthy. And now I'd like us to kind of compare and contrast what the men responded to that same question, what they were looking for in a potential mate. Number 5, men had that they would like a woman who is, again, fun or humorous. Number 4, they were looking for a woman who is intelligent. Number 3, they were looking for a woman who is attractive. Number 2, a woman who has strong faith. And again, the number 1 answer between men and women both were that they were looking for someone who is honest and trustworthy. And so when we look at this list and we kind of compare and contrast kind of the similarities and the differences, we notice that most of the answers are exactly the same, with the exception of maybe the order in which they fall. And there's 2 exceptions. On the women in the top 5, they had that they were looking for a good communicator. In the men's top 5, they did not have that. Instead, they were looking for a woman who was attractive. Okay? And so let me just speak to those differences real briefly. It's probably not shocking that men had in their top 5 that they were looking for a woman who is attractive. Right? We know that guys tend to be very visual creatures by nature. That's kind of how we are wired. But what I want to say to you ladies is that our definition of being attractive, if you were to ask most guys, and if they were being honest, it's not necessarily the ridiculous standards that you see of the airbrush model on the magazines. For us as guys, there's no exact standard of beauty. In fact, we all think certain different qualities and attributes and characteristics are very attractive. And ladies, what we want you to know when we say we're looking for an attractive woman is it's more of the total package that you carry. It's the way in which you carry yourself. So you can look like a supermodel, but if you carry yourself poorly, if you use certain language or have certain habits, that can be just as big of a turnoff to us guys. And then while we're talking about this, guys, just because we know and we admit that we tend to be wired visually, that's certainly not an excuse for us to kind of play that card or use that as an excuse to look at other women lustfully or to look at images of women lustfully. You know, sometimes I hear guys, and sometimes girls, but predominantly guys, they say real classy statements like, I'm just going to look, but I'm not going to touch. Or, I'm just window shopping, right? Real classy, guys, real classy. And I say that to say, you can come out on that wherever you like, but one thing I do know is that that kind of mindset, that kind of attitude has never once served to bring a marriage closer together. It has never once helped to make your marriage more healthy. The only thing that can possibly do is devalue your wife and be a hit to her self-esteem. And so guys, just guard what you put in front of your eyes. The other difference there in the survey was, again, that women were looking for a good communicator. What you might find surprising is that men actually, we want to communicate. And you're going to see that in the next question here, the next survey result. We want to communicate, but the problem is we're just not very good at it. Right? We're just not very good communicators. And there's certainly a whole number of reasons as to why that might be. It might, again, be the way in which God has wired us. But it's likely that it's because of the way in which we're raised, kind of the cultural expectations of guys and men. Think about a young boy who falls and gets hurt, maybe skins a knee or something like that. How do we respond to that? Do we say, go ahead and cry it out, buddy? No, we're like, be tough, rub some dirt on it, you're good to go. Let's go, get back in the game. That's just how we tend to raise our young boys. And so that coupled with the way in which we interact with our fathers, a lot of times our fathers aren't real emotional or able to share that with us, and so we kind of have that cycle. And so knowing that us guys tend to struggle with communication, and knowing that communication problems are really at the heart of most of our marital problems, I wanted to submit to us today a resource that I thought might be very helpful. It's been helpful to thousands of couples as well as to Alice and I, and it's the book, The 5 Love Languages. It's written by Gary Chapman. He's the author, and in it, he has this premise, basically, and he uses this metaphor of a love tank. He would say that each of us in our relationship has a love tank, and you can think of it just like a gas tank in a car, that for that car to work well, it continually needs to be filled up with the proper gas. And the same thing is true in our marriages, that for our marriages to work, we constantly have to be speaking love and filling up our partner's love tank. And we do that when we say things or do things that are meaningful, that are thoughtful to our spouse, and that serves to fill up our love tank. But the reverse is true, that when we are insensitive, when we say things that are hurtful, we tend to drain down that love tank. And so we constantly have to be looking for ways to avoid that and constantly looking for ways to fill up our spouse's love tank. Now, he went ahead and he identified 5 primary ways that we tend to receive love best. And these are the 5 primary love languages. The first one is called words of affirmation. And so that would just be that you might recognize in your spouse that they have done something well, that you've come behind them, encouraged them, that you have thanked them for their efforts, that you're giving them kind of an attaboy, like good job there. The second one is called quality time. And that just means carving, again, some time out so that you and your spouse can be one-on-one, maybe without the kids. Sometimes it's to share our hearts. Sometimes it's just to do stuff together. The third way that some people receive love is through the receiving of gifts. Sometimes people feel most loved when they get a gift from a loved one. It could be something that you bought. It could be something that you made, but they feel very loved because that person thought about them and said, you know what, I want to represent my love through giving this tangible gift to them. The fourth way that people feel loved is called acts of service. And that can just be something where you try to lift a burden from your spouse, where you try to come alongside them and do something meaningful for them, where you might come and help with the chores, where you might help with the children. That can speak love into somebody's life. And then the last one is called physical touch. Some people feel most loved when they are just close to their spouse, when they are able to hold their spouse's hand, when they're able to snuggle up against them, when they're able to be intimate. And so what I want to suggest is that if you've not read this book already, I would encourage you to get the book and work through it as a couple if you're having some communication problems there. And a start, if you'd like, is just you can go to 5lovelanguages.com and you take a brief survey, and they will tell you what your primary love language is. And so I would encourage you to have you and your spouse both take that, figure out what your love languages are so that you can be speaking love effectively into your husband or your wife. Because sometimes we have really good intentions, right? We have good intentions of trying to speak love into our husband and our wife, but sometimes, guys, we just kind of get it twisted, as evidenced by this video that I'd like you to see.
All right, here we go. Here it is. Okay.
This is my anniversary gift?
Yep.
A vacuum cleaner?
Dual bag. This is the best vacuum cleaner you'll ever have, baby.
Get in there.
What? Not a big fan of that look. I got you.
New arrival in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What is this place?
You are in the doghouse.
Doghouse?
Since time immemorial, when men have messed up, they get sent here by their wives or girlfriends. Fold.
Yeah, but I don't deserve to be here. I didn't do anything.
Every man in the doghouse thinks he's innocent. Isn't that right, boys?
Look, all I know is that I got my wife this really nice gift, and then now here.
What'd you get her?
This brand new dual bag vacuum cleaner, actually.
Hear that, boys? He got our vacuum cleaner.
You're a fool, man. Oh, it was dual bag.
And dual bag doesn't know why he's here.
Well, my hope is that we don't have any dual bags in the house this morning. Guys, if you've ever gone that route, all I can do is pray for you. I got nothing else. I don't even know. Let's go on to the next survey question that Adam Hamilton revealed there. And this question, he actually posed it to married men and women. And I want to look at the results of the married men. And this question was, what is it that a woman does that makes you feel loved? What is it that a woman does that makes you feel most loved, makes you come alive there? What you're going to notice is that a lot of these responses actually line up really nicely with those 5 love languages that we just talked about. The very first one is called quality time or doing things together. Again, just like the love language. Here's the difference, though, for most of us guys. Whereas quality time for a woman might be setting aside time to be quiet and be able to really share our feelings and thoughts, for guys, it's more like recreational companionship. It's this idea that we might be able to go and do something together. We might go exercise together. We might go ride our bikes together, play golf together, go hiking together. Just doing something with their spouse makes them feel very loved. The number 4 thing on the list of what makes a man feel loved by a woman is sexual intimacy, right? And again, not a big shocker here for this to be on the guy's list. And I certainly don't need to speak to this one much, but what I do want to say, ladies, is that I know that sometimes there can be a tendency to kind of want to withhold intimacy in a way to kind of manipulate your man or to punish your man. And I would just caution you on that, just because as I've studied this and read some of the research on this, and doing that, you can actually push your man further and further away in the relationship. And so all I would say to this is, husbands and wives both, just be responsive to the needs of your spouse there. The third one is family support. Family support is very similar to that acts of service that we just talked about in the 5 love languages. And so this would be kind of like caring about the physical and emotional needs of the household, for caring for the husband, caring for the kids. And in no way am I saying that us guys expect the wife to do all of the caring for the kids or the household, but we do feel very loved when we see that in action, when we see that kind of partnership happening in the household. And the interesting thing is that in the women's results, the exact same thing was said, that women feel very loved when a man comes alongside and helps to care for the kids and helps to care for her needs there. Number 2 is kind of the ironic one that we alluded to earlier, that men feel most loved when they have the opportunity to talk, to communicate, actually, to share their thoughts and be listened to. Again, we mentioned that most of us guys, we're just not very good at it. And with guys, what we need to understand is that sometimes we just need to have a little more space and more time to kind of get our thoughts together. And we really, ladies, we need an invitation to speak about the things that are important to us, right? And when we actually do, when us guys who tend to, be very much a closed book, when we actually open up, we need you to kind of celebrate those things, because usually what we want to talk about are things that make us proud, right? And that leads us to the last one. The number 1 thing that makes a man feel loved, according to these surveys, is admiration of their wives, in whatever form it might look like for you. But whenever our wives take pride in us, when they say meaningful and nice things to us, when they say meaningful and nice things about us, like when we overhear you talking to your friends and you're not putting us down like, my husband, he's so lame, but actually, when we actually overhear you saying, my husband did this for me and did that, and I'm proud of my husband, that just, sets us on fire. It just makes us feel very, very loved, that you are encouraging us, that you're supporting us, because here's the deal. Most of us guys, the truth is we want to be kind of that knight in shining armor that you've always dreamed about, ladies. And that's evidenced from the very earliest of ages, as you see middle school boys trying to attract the girl, and they're doing all kinds of awkward and crazy things, right? And as we get older, it doesn't get much better sometimes for us, right? We're always trying to impress you. We're always trying to make you proud of us. We're trying to win the girl and trying to be a hero to you, okay? And so, ladies, I do hope that some of that was helpful. Maybe you got a little bit of an insight into your man. And now what I'd like to do is I'd like to transition back into the scriptures and really pick up where Pastor Bob left off last week. Last week, Pastor Bob looked at Ephesians chapter 5. So if you have your Bibles, you can go ahead and flip to Ephesians chapter 5 and find verse 21. Last week, he actually talked about verses 22 through 24, which, as he said, it's been a text that has been very kind of controversial, very misunderstood. It's been really abused over the years to say that women have to be subservient to men, and that couldn't be further from the truth. And We don't have time to recap everything he said, so if you missed it last week, if you missed the sermon, go online to stpaulumc.org and check out that sermon. You'll be blessed if you do that. But what I want to do today is I want to actually back up a verse and start back at verse 21, because I believe with all my heart that verse 21 is the umbrella that we have to understand the rest of this text. That if we get verse 21 right, we'll get the rest of it right. Verse 21 says this, it says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. So there's this principle of mutual submission where both the husband and the wife needs to submit to each other for the marriage to work well. And notice what it says, submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. It doesn't say that we need to submit to one another because our spouse is so awesome or that they really deserve it, but it's because we do it out of reverence for Christ. And what I would submit to us this morning is that if we would get the cross right, if we would get the gospel right, we're going to get our marriages right. What often happens in a relationship is that somebody takes their eyes off the cross, somebody takes their eyes off the gospel, and they start implementing their own agenda. And that's when things start to get out of whack. And so I believe it's completely impossible. If I'm fully surrendered to my wife or to my husband, back up. If I'm fully surrendered to God, there we go. If I'm fully surrendered to God and living my life out completely in accordance with the scriptures, it's impossible for me to mistreat my spouse. It's impossible for me to mistreat my wife. And so we have to get the cross right. We have to get the gospel right first and foremost. All right, so let's skip over verse 22 through 24 and go right to 25. Husbands, pay attention here. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Guys, I hope you feel the weight and the responsibility that is in that small verse. Love your wives as Christ loved the church. And how did Christ love the church? Well, first of all, he pursued the church, right? It says that it's not that we loved him first, but because God loved us first, right? It says in the scriptures that Jesus didn't come to be served, but to serve, right? And think about all the ways that Christ has sacrificed, that Christ has put the needs of the church above his own, even above his own glory, that he would leave heaven and come to this place to stand in our place and to pay our debt. And so, fellas, that is what it's supposed to look like for us. Translate that into your marriages. Pursue your wife. Sacrifice for your wife. Put her needs above your needs. And when you're doing that, you're going to be loving her as Christ loved the church. Verse 26, to make her holy, cleansing her by the washing with water through the word. And so to me, this speaks to, guys, the need for us to be doing our part in the spiritual life of our homes and in our families. If we're not at least where your wife is making efforts to bring scripture, bring prayer into the household, to be praying for your children, if we're not leading in that capacity or at least on par where your wife is, then we're dropping the ball and we need to step our games up. And so here it says to make her holy by cleansing her with the washing through the word. And so read scripture over her. Read scripture like she's fearfully and wonderfully made, right? That she is a workmanship of God, that she's a masterpiece of God. Ask her how you can pray for her. Guys, when was the last time we asked our wife how we can pray for her? Let's make that a consistent habit. Verse 27, and to present her to himself as a radiant church, without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. He has this beautiful picture of a church that is without stain or wrinkle, that without any blemish. And to me, what this points to, guys, is that we are to create an environment for our wives to be the very best woman that she can possibly be, right? That we would come alongside of her and just cultivate her. In essence, what I'm suggesting is that we might be her biggest cheerleader, right? That whatever she wants to be about, that we get behind it, whether it's a hobby, whether she wants to go back to school and take a class. Guys, figure out a way to make that happen. All right, be her biggest cheerleader. and help to try to meet those needs. Verse 28, in the same way, husbands ought to love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself. Right, so there's this transition that Paul makes here from loving loving your wife like Christ loved the church, to loving your wife like you love your own bodies. And guys, let's be honest, we kind of love our own bodies, right? Even as we get older and get more and more out of shape, and things are in the wrong place and a little hairy there and that, we still get in the mirror and flex, and we're like, yep, still got it, you know. And so we've become experts. We've become experts at meeting the needs of our own body, loving our own bodies, knowing what our desires are. And so what I want to encourage you to do here is to do the same for your wife. Become a student of your wife. Know her inside and out. Know her wants, know her needs, know her desires, and do all within your power to meet those needs. And some of you might push back and you might say, well, Bobby, you don't know my wife. She's kind of complicated, right? And I would push back and I would say, well, so is fantasy football. But you figured that out every season, right? Here's the principle at play here. You learn what is important to you. You learn what you value. And so if we're sitting here saying that our wives are important to us, our wives are valuable to us, then we will learn them. We will know everything we can about them and try to meet their needs and desires. Verse 29, after all, no one ever hated his own body, but he feeds and cares for it, just as Christ does the church, for we are members of his body. So again, there's this imagery of feeding and caring for, providing, protecting, making your wife feel loved and secure, right, in our household. That's certainly one of our roles as a husband. Verse 31, for this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. This is a profound mystery, but I'm talking about Christ and the church. However, each one of you must also love his wife as he loves himself, and the wife must respect her husband. So verse 33 brings us right back to the beginning, basically, this idea of mutual submission. It says, wives, respect your husbands, and for about the third time here it says, husbands, love your wives. And guys, this is how we're going to know if we're getting our part right. If your wife feels like she is the most valuable person in the world, the most valuable thing to you in the entire world because of the way that you love her, then you're getting it right. But unfortunately, all too often in our marriages, sometimes our wives, they don't feel like they're the most valuable thing in our world. They feel like they're in third place. They feel like they're behind our jobs. They feel like they're behind our time with our kids. They feel like they're behind even our hobbies. And what a shame it is that sometimes our wives have to compete with a little white ball on the weekends, right? I know, I just offended like half the congregation here. And trust me, here's what I'm saying. I'm not saying don't play golf. I'm not saying don't go fishing. I'm not saying don't have a hobby. I love all those things, and I think it's important that we have those things, but it's how we prioritize those things. I would hate for my wife to say, Bobby, how can you be obsessed with a little white ball and not be obsessed with me? And so, I didn't get choked up like this in the first two, just because she's in the front row. That's, guys, how we know we're getting it right, that if our wives feel like they're the most valuable thing in this world and that they don't ever have to compete with another woman, with another image, with our jobs, or with some lame hobby, right? That's how we know that we're getting this thing right, okay? And so this morning, I hope that we have seen some things from God's word and from the surveys that we can put into action, both for wives and for husbands. And I just want to give a suggestion here. My thought is, and my hope is that many of us are kind of fired up now. We have some things to work with, and we're like, I'm going to try to implement that this week. And as your husband or as your wife kind of moves closely towards you or tries to do something meaningful in this regard, please don't say, well, you're only doing that because that was in the sermon this week, right? Reward the behavior. If you want it to be repeated, we're kind of like little puppies, you know? If you reward the behavior, we're likely going to repeat it. And so, wives, when your husband says, let's go on a date this week, just go for it, regardless of where he brings you, regardless of if it's a fast food joint or wherever it is, just honor that, honor his efforts, and I think we're going to see some great strides in this area. Now, what I need you to know is that next week we're going to really close up this sermon series in a very powerful way. Pastor Bob will be back, and he's going to give us all an opportunity to renew our marriage vows here in our worship service. It's going to be a very, very powerful moment for our marriages and for our church, and it's certainly going to be a Sunday that you're not going to want to miss, so please make plans to attend.